Welcome to Bedtime Horror, your portal to scary stories. The anticipation of the business trip had filled me with a mix of excitement and anxiety. As I settled into my seat on the plane, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that the journey was finally underway. Little did I know that this trip would be unlike anything I had ever imagined. As the plane taxied down the runway and soared into the sky, I glanced around at my fellow passengers. Everything seemed normal at first, a mix of tired travelers, business people engrossed in their laptops, and families trying to keep their children entertained. But then, my eyes landed on four figures that set my heart racing. Four burly men sat together a few rows ahead of me, their imposing figures drawing my attention like a magnet. They were the epitome of intimidation, with bulging muscles and an air of danger that seemed to radiate from them. Tattoos adorned their arms, peeking out from beneath their sleeves, hinting at a past that was anything but ordinary. Unease settled in the pit of my stomach as I watched them interact with each other in hushed tones. Their glances were furtive, and occasionally they exchanged sinister grins that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to shake off my unease, attributing my discomfort to mere paranoia. But as the flight progressed, my anxiety only grew stronger. The tension escalated when one of the men became increasingly agitated. He berated a flight attendant over a minor issue, his voice loud and demanding. The flight attendant, clearly flustered, tried to defuse the situation, but the man's anger was palpable. I exchanged worried glances with nearby passengers, sensing that something was about to erupt. My heart raced as the situation spiraled out of control. The other three men joined in, their voices rising in a cacophony of anger. The flight attendants struggled to maintain their composure, their attempts at diplomacy failing against the growing aggression. Passengers began to whisper among themselves, anxiety spreading like wildfire. It was then that the unthinkable happened. One of the men lunged at a flight attendant, the sheer force of his movement catching everyone off guard. Chaos erupted as another passenger jumped up to intervene, and a melee ensued. Shouts, cries, and the sound of scuffling filled the cabin. The plane became a battleground, and the sense of dread that had been building was now a reality. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I instinctively braced myself for whatever might come next. The commotion continued, and the atmosphere grew increasingly charged. It was clear that these four men were not merely angry passengers, they were a force to be reckoned with, and they had no qualms about unleashing their fury on anyone who crossed their path. As the fight escalated, I realized that the plane was hurtling towards a dangerous precipice. The tension was suffocating, and it was only a matter of time before things took an even more terrifying turn. I watched with a mixture of fear and determination, knowing that I couldn't remain a passive bystander any longer. The fight had become a battle for survival, and I was about to be thrust into the heart of it. Amid the chaos that engulfed the plane, a sense of urgency propelled me into action. The screams and struggles of passengers reverberated through the cabin as I mentally prepared myself for what lay ahead. The four dangerous men had become a terrifying force, and their actions threatened the safety of everyone on board. I glanced around, searching for something, anything, that could help tip the scales in our favor. My eyes landed on a heavy-duty flashlight beneath a nearby seat. With a quick, determined movement, I grabbed it, my fingers curling tightly around the handle. It wasn't much, but it was a potential weapon, and I was willing to use whatever means necessary to protect myself and the others. As I approached the escalating brawl, my heart pounded in my chest. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, and I felt a strange mix of fear and determination. The flight attendants were doing their best to regain control, but they were clearly outmatched by the sheer strength and aggression of the four men. Seeing an opportunity, I swung the flashlight with all the force I could muster, aiming for the nearest assailant. The blow connected with a satisfying thud, and the man staggered back, momentarily stunned. It was a small victory, but it created a brief window of opportunity for the flight attendants to intervene. Chaos continued to reign as the crew worked to subdue the men. It was a harrowing battle, with shouts, blows, and desperate struggles filling the cabin. The once orderly plane had transformed into a battleground of survival, and the collective will of the passengers began to shift from fear to resistance. As the scuffle carried on, the dangerous men's bravado began to waver. The realization that they were facing determined opposition seemed to unsettle them. Amid the tumult, a new threat emerged, their attempt to open one of the cabin doors. Panic surged through the plane as the ominous possibility of a depressurized cabin loomed. The atmosphere inside the plane shifted as a sudden rush of cold air filled the cabin. The cabin pressure dropped, and fog began to form as the air inside condensed. Passengers gasped, their breath misting in front of them, adding to the surreal and nightmarish scene. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, urgent and strained, as he announced that the plane would be descending to a lower altitude to restore normal conditions. The descent was abrupt and jarring, accompanied by the roar of the engines as the plane rapidly dropped in altitude. The sudden movement intensified the chaos on board, causing passengers to stumble and fall. The dangerous men struggled to maintain their footing, their grip on control slipping through their fingers. Through the fog and chaos, the cabin crew managed to regain control over the situation. The assistance of passengers who had joined the fight turned the tide against the four men. The plane's descent continued, and the emergency landing procedures were initiated. It was a tumultuous and nerve-wracking experience, but the ordeal was far from over. As the plane touched down on the runway, the passengers erupted into a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The police were waiting on the tarmac, ready to apprehend the dangerous men who had terrorized the flight. The confrontation had ended, but the emotional aftermath lingered, a mixture of trauma and camaraderie forged in the face of danger. My business trip had taken an unexpected turn, plunging me into a harrowing ordeal that I would never forget. The plane had become a battleground, and in the chaos and uncertainty, the human spirit had prevailed. As I disembarked from the plane, I couldn't help but feel a newfound appreciation for life, a deeper understanding of the strength that emerges when faced with the unthinkable. The airplane's engines roared to life as the passengers settled into their seats, eager to reach their destinations. I found myself in a window seat, gazing out at the tarmac as we taxied toward the runway. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, creating an eerie atmosphere. Little did I know, this flight would become a journey of terror. As we gained speed and lifted off, the cabin lights dimmed, and the hum of the engines created a soothing backdrop. I closed my eyes, attempting to relax, but a subtle unease settled in the pit of my stomach. Beside me, a woman clutched her armrest, her knuckles turning white. Her name was Emily, and her wide eyes darted around the cabin, searching for something unknown. "Are you okay?" I asked, concern lacing my voice. She glanced at me, her lips trembling. I have a fear of flying. I thought I could handle it this time, but... I nodded understandingly, offering a reassuring smile. Little did I know that Emily's fear would soon become the least of our worries. Hours passed, and the flight seemed uneventful. The cabin lights were still low, and many passengers had dozed off. I was about to close my eyes when a sudden jolt rocked the plane, sending a shiver down my spine. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the cabin as the intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've encountered some turbulence, but please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts." I tightened my seatbelt and exchanged a worried glance with Emily. The plane continued to shake, and the once soothing hum of the engines turned into an ominous groan. Then, A loud bang echoed through the cabin, followed by a rush of cold air. Panic swept through the passengers as oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. The intercom crackled again, this time with urgency. "Brace for impact." My heart raced as the plane descended rapidly, the ground looming closer. The cabin was a symphony of screams and chaos. I gripped the armrests, my knuckles turning white like Emily's had been earlier. The impact was brutal, a cacophony of screeching metal and shattering glass. Darkness enveloped me as the world spun, and then there was silence. I awoke disoriented, surrounded by debris. Smoke filled the air, and the once familiar cabin had transformed into a twisted nightmare. My body ached, but adrenaline propelled me to my feet. I scanned the wreckage, searching for signs of life. "Emily?" I called out, my voice shaky. A moan answered me, and I rushed toward the sound. There she was, trapped beneath a piece of the fuselage. With desperate strength, I managed to free her, and we stumbled away from the wreckage together. As we emerged from the wreckage, a chilling realization struck me. Our plane had crashed on a deserted island. The eerie setting and the uncertainty of our survival cast a new shadow over our harrowing journey. Emily and I stood on the desolate beach. Our eyes were scanning the horizon for any signs of rescue. The wreckage of the plane lay scattered behind us, a grim reminder of the terror we had just experienced. The island seemed untouched by time, with dense foliage and towering trees casting eerie shadows. "We need to find help," Emily said, her voice trembling. I nodded in agreement, our desperation growing with each passing minute. As we ventured further into the forest, we discovered strange markings on trees and the remnants of makeshift shelters. It became clear that we were not the first to be stranded on this forsaken island. Deeper we went, our unease mounting. Unfamiliar sounds surrounded us, the eerie calls of unseen creatures and the whispering of the wind through the trees. At one point, I could have sworn I glimpsed shadowy figures darting among the underbrush, but when I turned to look, nothing was there. Fearing for our safety, we decided to retreat back to the beach. With every step, a sense of foreboding settled over us, as if the island itself resented our presence. We were not alone, and the feeling only grew stronger as night descended. Back on the beach, we huddled together, our faces illuminated by the flickering fire we had managed to start. The darkness seemed to press in on us from all sides, and the distant sounds of the forest took on an ominous tone. Just when hope was beginning to fade, a distant light caught our attention, an approaching boat, its searchlights cutting through the night. We signaled with our flashlights, relief flooding through us. As the boat neared the shore, we could see the crew members, their concerned expressions turning to smiles as they spotted us. Moments later, we were on the boat, leaving the island behind. The sight of the receding trees brought both a sense of liberation and a lingering unease. We had escaped the clutches of that mysterious place, but the memories of what we had encountered would haunt us forever. Days later, we were back home, safe and sound. The experience had changed us, deepening our appreciation for the familiar comforts of home and the company of loved ones. We shared our story, though the true nature of the island's secrets remained our own. And while life returned to normal, a part of us would always remain on that island, an island that held mysteries beyond our comprehension, and a darkness that we were fortunate to leave behind.